Shalom from Jerusalem. This is Watchmen Talk, a series of conversations with Israeli experts and practitioners in intelligence, military, security, and diplomatic fields. And our guest today for a third part of our long conversation is General Amnon Sofrin, PhD. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying. And you moved from military intelligence, where you attained the rank of Brigadier General, and you were the head of the Combat Intelligence Corps, to Mossad, wearing civilian clothes, no longer in uniform, but
More convenient.
more convenient. Well, some would say that having the same uniform, not having to worry what to wear today, is also convenient.
Right.
So Iran was one of the issues on your plate. How long was the Iranian project? How advanced was it when you took over, General Dagan as Mossad chief and you as his intelligence division chief? Was Iran really close to at least a first bomb when the Americans invaded Iraq and, according to the American version, caused Iran to stop its project?
I think they were exaggerating. I think they were far away from having the capability to produce the first device. I think that, first of all, they had a conversion facility which was activating. They had some, I think was about 10,000 centrifuge installed in Natanz. They began to dig and build up the second facility in Fordo, but they were far away from having the capability to produce the materials and to get to enrichment of about 90%.
So there was no point in bombing Iran at the time?
No, not at all. Not at all.
In advance of the American war against Saddam Hussein, what was your assessment regarding his weapons of mass destruction? Of course, the Americans believed they did not fool anyone but themselves. They really, truly believed that this was the case. They were obviously deceived by some agents who had their own interests. What was yours?
And the son-in-law of Saddam as well.
The son-in-law of Saddam.
Who deserted to the West and gave information, which probably was false.
Why? Why did he do it?
Maybe he was sent by Saddam himself.
But what was...
to mislead everyone.
Why was
to deter them from invading Iraq.
But it only provoked them to do it. Perhaps the Oriental mind and the Occidental mind probably work in different ways.
Totally. I can tell you from one of my research that I carried out within my PhD thesis was regarding the UK decision to join the Americans to the invasion to Iraq. And Mr. Tony Blair tried to find out any justification to join the war. And then he told these people, his military intelligence people and the MI6, to prepare a file or a dossier which is incriminating Iraq for having new non-conventional weapon systems.
And he did that in order to be on President Bush's good side.
Of course.
And he told him, I will be with you.
As long as anything you want, I will be with you. He told him that on April 2002, while being at Crawford, at the George Bush Ranch for a weekend, and nobody knew what they talked about.
Almost a year before the war started.
Right. He gave him his commitment, and then he got back home. He updated only a few people around him, and in the end, he told these people to prepare such a dossier that will incriminate Iraq and tell them that they had conventional weapons.
What about your dossier? What did you know or believe you knew?
We believe that Iran had non-conventional weapons.
Chemical, biological?
Chemical and biological.
Not nuclear?
No, not nuclear. Not at that time. Even though they went over to a centrifuge enrichment instead of the reactor that was demolished in 1981. But we didn't believe they're going to do anything with that, and to begin launching rockets and missiles all around.
So these are two different assessments. One, whether they have it, and the other one, whether they will use it. Or if Saddam, as the saying was, will have his back to the wall, will, as a desperate last act, do it.
Yeah, that was the assessment, that he's going to use it, if it's going to happen.
And Mossad shared this assessment with military intelligence.
Right.
But the group responsible for assessment is military intelligence, not
For that issue, right. Yeah.
for other issues. Mossad is responsible.
There is a debate, what is the responsibility of the military intelligence to give what we call the early warning? And Mr. Dagan had a debate with the DMI, Director of Military Intelligence, for a very long time.
General Farkas.
General Farkas. He said, your responsibility is to give early warning for a war or some hostile act against Israel, not for everything.
Not for a major terror act?
No. He said the responsibility for a major terror act is divided between the Shabak, the Internal Security Agency, and the military intelligence. What happens abroad is under the control of the Mossad totally, so you don't have anything to do with that. And for example, when Mr. Sharon was prime minister, he defined that the Iranian issue would be led by the Mossad and not by the military intelligence.
Including the diplomatic side.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so there was this debate within the intelligence community, and your organization, Mossad, is, as you said, mostly operational. Of course, there are intelligence inputs into it,
right.
but the whole idea is to serve the operational side.
Not only. I said because...
And decision makers.
And decision makers, right.
So when the Iraqi war unfolded, obviously one of the most important parts was the American one, because the Americans decided that there will be a war. But according to what most Israelis read since Ben-Gurion's time, you are not supposed to collect intelligence on Americans.
No.
So how do you reconcile your need to know the blue side as well as the red one if you have to come up with a net assessment?
You have two ways. The first one, you share information with your colleagues abroad, meaning in the US, in the UK, everywhere. Essential, of course. Essential elements of information, not everything. And there is what we call a third-part agreement, that you can't share the information that you got from some of your colleagues. You can't share it with anyone else without his permission. And the second issue, that you have a military attaché at the United States, and he's, of course, going to the Pentagon and listening and asking questions. And these...
Regular channels.
Right.
But there is a problem there, because intelligence agencies are very fanatically guarding the identity of their sources, but you, as the consumer of their product, want to know who is the source. Is he or she or the technical means reliable? We found out that the Iraqi war was fed by unreliable sources. So can you take it at face value when you get some intelligence product, even without the possibility of the other side feeding it to you for some purpose?
First of all, they don't share their sources with us. None of them. As we do. Okay?
We don't.
We don't, of course. We don't share information or our sources with anyone. Everybody keeps his own sources for himself, and you only update him with what we call processed information.
But then you have another danger. Right. If both of you recruited the same agent without knowing it, you think you have it from two sources.
The golden egg. No.
But it's the same guy.
No, but in the end, you generate an assessment. Okay, you take into consideration what you have and what you got from your allies, and you generate the whole picture according to your understanding.
But even without spying on the U.S., especially after the Pollard affair, you have to assess what the United States will do, what is its staying power. If it is bogged down in Iraq, what will it do vis-a-vis Syria or Iran or the Palestinians? Are you also doing that?
Yeah, we're doing our assessment of what are the implications of such activities of the U.S. If the U.S. is going to interfere in Iraq, what will be the outcomes? What will endanger Israel out of that? Okay? But you don't follow the Americans, not at all.
Now, when you worked for Mossad, it was earlier this century, technology has improved immensely over earlier generations. Mm-hmm. And the balance between human and SIGINT, human intelligence and signal intelligence, other electronic parts of the work has shifted. What was your assessment? Should Mossad and other similar agencies around the world still rely on human sources the way they used to do?
You have to see a broader picture because, first of all, you have more SIGINT capabilities. On the other hand, there is no substitute for a source that is very close to the decision makers at one state, enemy state, of course, and they can give you the most reliable information coming out directly from the mouth of senior people in this state. So you have to weigh everything and to build up your what we call gathering plan, which is combined of SIGINT, your allies, part of it, and of course human and other resources as well, other sources as well, not only, and to build up the capabilities and to be able to monitor and to see if we have a coverage good enough with the SIGINT area on a certain area or certain issues. You don't have to waste or to recruit people in that area as well, to have double efforts. Okay, so you have to make the balance between all of them.
But if you have, let's say, the king's closest confidant or someone in the prime minister's bureau of some country, can't you also use them as agents of influence if you want them to shape policy for the other side? Shouldn't you also tell them what outcome you would like to have as the state of Israel when their councils of state convene?
You try to affect them as much as you can, but you do it very carefully not to expose it, not to expose this guy or guys, whoever they are, and not to endanger them.
Why are agents in this day and age still come to work for foreign intelligence services? Is it money? Are they tempted? Are they being coerced, pressured into serving? What's the main motive?
It's very complicated. It's not only money. Money comes in the end. But the first motive to come and to be able to work for Israel or whoever is for many reasons. Some of them coercion, some of them disappointment, frustration, you name it. So in the end, after deterioration, what we call, the issue of money comes off. But it's not the main issue. And unlike what people tend to think.
Now, we all remember the case of Ashraf Marwan in 1973.
Right.
And while he had a regular case officer, the Mossad chief, Tzvi Zamir, insisted on running him himself, meeting him. And obviously, the prime minister and the minister of defense and others knew his identity. Mm-hmm. Has this practice changed ever since? Do the people in the political echelon even know the identity of Mossad sources?
They know when we transfer the information to them, we say who their source is, only for the prime minister.
his position and name? Only for the prime minister?
Only for the prime minister.
And not even his military secretary, people around him?
No,
Personally? Not even the Minister of Defense?
no, not necessarily. Depends on the issue. But the head director of the Mossad is going to meet very important people that have important information to deliver, and he wants to see the man to get his own impression on the people, and to be able to decide whether to trust him, to be is he reliable enough.
It is not the agent who insists on meeting the Mossad chief, but the other way around.
No, right.
But is this a good practice? Because the Mossad chief may not be as astute and experienced in reading agents, especially from Arab countries, as some of his officers may be. There was this claim that because only Ashkenazi officers met, in particular Ashraf Marwan, they couldn't understand what to make of him.
I think the director of the Mossad, whoever it is, has enough experience in life and is skilled enough to notice and to be able to decide for himself whether this person is reliable enough or not.
General Sofrin, you were there for the so-called Second Lebanon War in 2006,
Right.
in which General Dagan, based on his military experience, had opinions which did not coincide with what the defense minister and the chief of staff suggested to the cabinet.
Correct.
Were you
said-
there with him?
Of course. From the first day of the war up to the last day, he insisted from the first day of the war, from the minute the war broke out, that if we don't maneuver with ground forces, we'll never get to any achievement in Lebanon.
But
Just attacks from beyond, meaning using airplanes, artillery, rockets, and so on, will bear no consequences, no fruits.
But politically, because of public opinion, because the withdrawal from Lebanon only took part 6 years earlier, was that feasible? One has to take into account these aspects too. It is not only a professional judgment.
I think it was feasible if the armed forces were prepared enough for this mission, which were not.
But this you didn't know because Mossad does not cover
No.
the
IDF.
Israeli Defense Forces.
No. Not at all. Not at all.
But you retired only 4 or even 3 years earlier. Were you aware of the hollowness of the forces?
Not to that extent.
How come?
I was surprised, really, by the weakness of the ground forces and the maneuvers and the attempts to
So in that regard, the Palestinians were successful in drawing the IDF into the territories for counter-terror missions, for police actions, and neglecting the preparations for regular war.
Right.
So is that a lesson for Israel?
Of course. Israel should be prepared to be able to launch a military operation wherever it needed and whenever it needed, with very short notice, and not to say, okay, we need now a year to be prepared. No, it doesn't work as well.
So in your 5 years there, you had the Iraq War, you had the Lebanon War, and you had the North Korean nuclear reactor in Syria, all
together.
All together. This is considered an intelligence coup, and especially Mossad's.
Right.
How did that come about?
It began in 2003. 2003, November 19th. Suddenly I hear on the news that Libya has decided to give up its non-conventional capabilities.
A Mossad failure.
Oops. And we didn't know anything. We were surprised twice. First of all, by the idea that there was a nuclear plan in Libya. That was a turnkey project made by the Pakistanis, and especially by Abdullah Qadr Khan, who was the father of the Islamic bomb. And second, the UK and the US were negotiating with Libya for about 8 months
Without letting you know.
without letting us know. All of us.
That's not nice.
No, it's not friendly. But in the end, when we learned the lesson, we found out two main things. The first one is it was a very advanced project installed by the Pakistanis. Second, the centrifuge were installed in very civilian places like classrooms and so on, without any surrounding or giving clues that something is happening there.
But you must have some water source next to it.
Yeah. And then we came on and I said, okay, this is a failure. Now let's see, Mr. Khan, of course, wasn't only in Libya. Let's see wherever he he was visiting very often in the Middle East.
So this is what Secretary Rumsfeld called unknowable unknowables.
Right. And they told me in a very short notice that he was visiting in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Syria. I say, okay, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, I put aside because they are very attached to the Americans and they won't do anything to violate the NPT. Syria, let's see what happens in Syria. And we began focusing on Syria, and I took two very experienced analysts and said, okay, please go over what we have in Syria regarding nuclear over the past 10 years.
These are nuclear experts from the Atomic Energy Commission or military?
No.
Your own Mossad?
Your own Mossad man, my own Mossad man. And they came after a month and a half and said, okay, we have a conclusion. We believe that Syria is actually running a nuclear program.
This is in early 2004.
It's the end of 2003, yeah, beginning of 2004.
2 years before you actually found.
Almost 3 years. Almost 3 years. And I said, okay, what you're basing your assumption on? They said, okay, A, B, C, and D, and E. Okay, said, I have two requests for you. First of all, give me the main pieces of information I want to go over by myself. And I took another group of two other analysts, independent.
Red team.
And they say, please go over the materials without knowing what they told me, and I want your conclusion about it. And they came to the same conclusion. And I came to the same conclusion myself. And when I came to General Dagan at the beginning, he said, are you serious? This poor country with the old tanks and APCs.
So the conclusion is that someone else is doing it for them or helping them.
Right. And then we began launching a very, very ambitious gathering plan. We took 3 years with a lot of operations and going from point to point and tying the links. And in the end, we came out with 5 sites that we had suspicion that there was military or nuclear capabilities.
And Deir Azur was one of them.
One of them. Of course, it is the main core. That was the reactor. And we were looking for centrifuge at the beginning because of some piece of information that we got earlier. And suddenly somebody is telling me, a young officer from Amman,
from the military
intelligence, is telling me, maybe I'm looking for the wrong thing. Maybe we should look for a reactor. And then we found out that the North Koreans...
Yongbyon.
Some North Koreans are attending in Syria. We knew that some of them were there because they pressed or helped the Syrians build the line for the ballistic missiles that were transferred from North Korea to Syria. But we found some other Koreans as well, and we began tracking them. And then we reached this facility on Deir Azor on the banks of the Paratus River. And when we got deeper and deeper, we found out that this is actually a reactor.
So the story of finding the blueprints or the pictures on a computer belonging to a Syrian official, as if by chance, this is wrong. This is the folklore part of, or the cover story, perhaps.
It's not by chance, because we insisted on going, every time this man left Syria, we insisted going and paying a visit at his belongings. And
When he was in Vienna or other places.
And actually we find out these incriminating pictures that he's actually carelessly took on his personal computer.
Do you remember this eureka moment that when you had...
That suddenly you're looking for something, you have suspicion, and suddenly there is a light. And you're, wow.
General Sofrin, we ran out of time. Just in conclusion, what should Israel do vis-a-vis Iran now that we are in 2022, after all was said and done, in very short sentences?
To keep on doing what we are doing right now, meaning to try to slow down the Iranian efforts to get to a nuclear device and to work in coordination with the US.
Does the Israeli decision-making system apply well to national security crisis? Because you delved into it in your PhD thesis, what's your conclusion?
I believe that something had to be improved during these processes.
And most of the time, this was under Prime Minister Netanyahu. Now it has been improved?
I don't know. I'm not there to see it, but I hope it is better.
So this is your next career, diplomacy, because you managed to escape from the question.
No, I don't have any ambition to go there.
Retired General Amnon Sofrin, former military intelligence and Mossad senior officer, and the writer of a very interesting PhD thesis. Thank you very much for coming to TV7 News.
Thank you.
And we will be back with another edition of Watchmen Talk very soon.